Still using Adjust 4, Fish 2 when baiting with corn? No wonder carp won't bite your hook. I chatted with an angler yesterday about carp fishing. He complained that the carp in his area don't like corn and that he'd never caught a carp using corn. I wasn't surprised. I've heard similar remarks countless times, just like how some anglers grumble about failing to catch carp with snail carp bait. In fact, carp are highly omnivorous and truly not picky eaters. It's just that this fish is so cunning that it won't easily take the hook. If we compare grass carp and carp, with the same number of fish around, grass carp are much easier to catch. Grass carp are merely timid and wary of humans, making it hard to lure them into the nest. But once they're in the nest, they're easy to catch even with thick lines or large hooks, and there's no need to fuss over adjusting the float to specific meshes. Carp are different. Luring them into the nest isn't difficult because they're extremely curious. They'll even swim over to check out sounds. The challenge with carp is getting them to bite. When I used to study carp fishing, I'd fish while watching an underwater camera. Sometimes, they'd avoid the bait if the line was too thick. Sometimes, if there was too much chum, they'd ignore the hook. And float adjustment is another crucial factor that can't be overlooked. Some anglers might say, "Why all the hassle? Just use a big running lead and let them eat if they want." I'd say using a running lead is actually better. At least the hook and bait lie steadily on the bottom, so the fish aren't scared, and it's easier for them to take the bait. The real problem is anglers who obsess over float adjustment without understanding it, ending up with one hook on the bottom and the other suspended. The angler I mentioned earlier did exactly that. He baited with corn, adjusted the float to 4 meshes and fished at 2 meshes, but used a thick line and a large hook. What's more, he had his own theory. Thick lines and large hooks make the setup too dull, so the float needs to be adjusted to be more sensitive. This balances it out, making it neither too sensitive nor too dull. I was completely dumbfounded and didn't know how to respond for a moment. If you're fishing for topmouth coulter, bream, or grass carp, a sensitive setup is fine. Having one hook on the bottom and one suspended can cover 2 water layers. But this strategy backfires with carp. If the corn is floating and wiggling in front of them, wild big carp may not dare to eat it. Especially with a thick line, they're even less likely to bite. Even if they do, the float will dither for ages without a sharp downward jerk. Leaving other seasons aside, when fishing for carp in summer and autumn, a dull setup works well. Even a big running lead is better than Adjust 4, Fish 2, or Adjust 5, Fish 3. I've shared my carp float adjustment method several times before. On days with no strong winds, no currents, slight currents are okay, and not so many small fish that the float can't stay upright, a small running lead is perfectly sufficient. Here's the method: adjust the float to sit level with the water without the hook. After attaching the hook and bait, simply push the float up until 2 to 3 meshes are visible above the water. A big running lead isn't unusable either. It works on windy, flowing days, or when you're just too lazy to adjust the float. However, there's an important note: some anglers using big running leads may encounter these issues. 1. The float bobs slightly up and down, then stops moving. 2. You see a nice sharp dip or the float disappears underwater, but lifting the rod catches nothing. 3. You finally hook a fish, but it breaks free. Mostly, these happen because the fish feel the pull of the lead and spit out the bait. I've experienced this too, which is why I rarely use big running leads now. But why does this happen? Let me explain clearly. With normal float adjustments, no matter the mesh settings, even with a small running lead, the entire line setup is balanced. So fish don't need to exert much force to pull the line, and once the hook is in their mouth, it's hard for them to spit it out, or it takes them a long time to do so, giving us plenty of time to lift the rod. Big running leads are different. With a big running lead, the line setup is unbalanced. So whether the fish are eating the bait or shaking their heads afterward, they easily detect the lead's presence. The moment they feel even a slight pull in their mouth, they'll spit out the bait quickly. That's why people see small twitches but no strong movements, or strong movements that yield no catch. The fish spit out the bait too fast. How to fix this? Besides using the first method, there's a simpler, more straightforward way: make the lead even heavier and heavier. This way, when the fish takes the hook and bait into its mouth and shakes its head slightly, the heavy lead creates a strong counterforce, making the hook easily embed in the fish's mouth. The harder it struggles, the deeper the hook sinks. Note that whether using a big or small running lead, the hook must be large enough. Otherwise, the fish can easily spit out the hook and bait. Even if hooked, it won't be deep enough and will come loose with a slight pull. For the leader line, 10 to 20 centimeters is recommended, depending on the fish size. I usually keep it around 10 centimeters, which works fine for catching 10 plus fish. If you don't encounter the above issues with running leads, no adjustment is needed. If you do, switch to a small running lead or try making the lead heavier over 10 grams. For fishing in strong currents with a stiff rod, no float visibility, 20 to 30 grams works. Author profile: I'm a fishing enthusiast and a self-media blogger who loves sharing tips. Follow me to exchange fishing skills and explore every detail of wild fishing. Give a like, save, and follow to never miss the next update.